Infectious diseases such as measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever and tuberculosis were a major killer in the 19th century and early 20th century. A combination of poor medical knowledge, poor sanitation and overcrowding led to thousands of deaths. Disease was a constant threat to young and old alike. In 1850, cholera alone killed more than 1,500 people in Newcastle. Children were most at risk, particularly those under 5 years old. The records of burials in St James's graveyard tell many sad stories of children dying at a young age. In the years before the First World War, nearly half of all the people buried here were under 3 years old. Poverty and the associated problems of malnutrition and poor housing conditions increased the likelihood of illness and early death, but wealth was no guarantee of good health. Denton Dockery Christopherson, aged 5, and his younger brother, Claude, aged 4, both died of scarlet fever in 1879. The children are buried together in St James's graveyard. These children were not from a poor background. Their father was the headmaster of the Royal Grammar School, proving that infectious diseases were no respecter of class or wealth. In the 19th century, it was still common for young children to work for long hours under harsh and dangerous conditions. Before 1842, it had even been legal to employ children under the age of 10 to work underground in coal mines, where they often suffered terrible accidents. The situation improved somewhat after 1870, when the government passed a law saying that education had to be provided for all children between the ages of 5 and 13. However, many factory owners were opposed to the spread of education, fearing that they would lose this source of cheap labour. It was another 10 years before a new law made it compulsory for children up to 10 years old to attend school. Several new schools were built in Benwell, Elswick and Scotswood in the years before the First World War. Denton Road School, South Benwell School, Elswick Road School, Canning Street School. But schools were often the very place where infectious diseases were able to spread rapidly. Class sizes at that time were large and sometimes had twice the number of pupils we would expect today. Poverty was also widespread in Benwell. Atkinson Road School had many pupils who received free boots or clogs from the Boot Fund, which was run by the council. And in 1910 a centre was set up in South Benwell School to feed needy children. Atkinson Road School recorded many outbreaks of infectious diseases. In 1912 it was one of the schools in the city which closed for several weeks due to an epidemic of scarlet fever. 2 years later, a big measles epidemic caused the absence of more than a quarter of all pupils. At the end of the First World War, a major influenza epidemic caused the school to be closed for more than 7 months. Infectious diseases continued to be a common problem well into the first half of the 20th century, and it wasn't until 1936 that immunisation against some infectious diseases started to be introduced. Mass vaccination programmes didn't begin until the 1960s. Before the National Health Service was created in 1948, people usually had to pay for their health care. Sometimes free treatment was available from hospitals or clinics paid for by charity or run by councils. There was little or no help for sick babies, since it was generally believed that not much could be done for them. The West End Babies Hospital in West Parade, Elswick, was unusual in providing health and care for very young children. The treatment of infectious diseases often involved being kept in isolation in a fever hospital for several weeks. This was bound to be a traumatic experience for children and parents alike, as the hospitals did not allow visitors and were usually far away from where people lived. Some parents could wave through the windows to their children and could leave gifts or treats for them. Progress on patients was published in the local newspaper, with each patient being referred to by a number and not by name. Patients could be described as anything from convalescing and doing well to critical and dangerously ill. In the years before the Second World War, open-air schools were introduced from Europe. They were thought to be beneficial to children with illnesses such as tuberculosis. Pendower Hall Open Air School opened in 1925 for delicate children. Being on a hill, it had good fresh air and was set in beautiful grounds. Children were literally taught in the open air, and in winter were wrapped in blankets against the cold. In severely cold conditions, the ink would freeze in the inkwells. There were rest sheds in the grounds where the children rested every day, again in the fresh air. The school was rebuilt in 1971 in the grounds of Pendower Hall. In 1999 it became Hadrian's School and caters for children with additional needs.